Hello everyone, Brother Al McClaney with this week's stewardship video. And as always, before we go too far, no advice should be seen as a recommendation, as I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only. If you have a financial advisor or registered investment advisor, if that's what they're there press on them, call on them, use them, because that's what you're paying for advice from them. So this video is made um, in the shadow of the Memorial Day weekend, in which Memorial Day is for those service members who made the ultimate sacrifice. And it's different than Veterans Day, in which we honor all veterans. But Memorial Day is not only, for veterans, but it's specifically for those veterans who died in the service of their country. It could be even if they were on training missions, but it was part of their service in which they did the ultimate sacrifice. Well, that's part of their legacy. Well, this video actually revisits a video I did over 5 years ago. It was actually December 2020, in which it was a discussion about leaving a legacy, and it was inspired by my mom's niece, my second cousin, Shelby. And I used actually the same slides, but now we're fast forwarding 5 years. So let's start off with a Warren Buffett quote in which he says, "Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago." And that's the penetrating question, is what type of legacy are you leaving? And as I said, these are the actual slides from December 6th, 2020, where I did this video. And it says, inspired by my cousin Shelby, who was inspired by my mom, Betty McClaney. You can see my mom to the left, who's going on to be with the Lord, along with my dad, who died a couple of years ago. My mom died in 2019, uh, and my mom was a school teacher. And one of the things is Shelby did an essay that helped her get into Tulane, called "Slow Down Shelby," in which my mom taught Shelby to read. And my aunt talked about how Shelby spent like a weekend or several days with my mom, who was a first grade teacher. And by the time she came back, she was reading. And Shelby had wrote that essay, inspired by my mom. And so a couple of Bible verses were highlighted that I used back in 2020. Says Proverbs 13:22, a good person leaves an inheritance to their children's children. And if you do the math, if you will, or do figure that out, that's grandchildren. And when we're talking about legacy, we're not only talking about, of course, material, monetary property, stocks, those type of things, but we're also talking about wisdom. First Peter 4:10 says, God has given each of you some special abilities. Be sure to use them to help each other, passing on to others God's many kinds of blessings, which one of the most important thing that my mom and dad taught me was to love the Lord and the plan of salvation, the gospel in which I became saved. And for all of us, solved a problem that I could not solve no matter how much effort I utilized. I could not solve the sin problem. And the sin problem is that God requires perfection. And only through our belief in the work of Jesus Christ on the cross and his resurrection can we have that problem solved. And so here's the culmination. Because on this month in 2025, last Saturday, my wife and I attended Shelby's graduation. And you can see her mom, Lindsay Arrington, all the different things that she crafted for her daughter. And because Tulane is in New Orleans, they do that second line. You all people from Louisiana know. So once they graduated, they did the traditional pomp and circumstance coming in. But when they left after their graduation, they did the second line, and there's Shelby's umbrella. And on Shelby's cap, the back of it, you can barely see. There's a picture of my mom and dad, the jewel that was on the back of her cap. And here's myself and Shelby, the graduate. And you can see here, here's the program. And it was May 17th, 2025 that Shelby crossed the stage. And you can hear it here. You can see her. You see there's her pink. She had a pink cap. There she is walking up. And they just remember they did do the valedictorian, the commencement speaker. Now you're going to hear Shelby after this. And now here's Shelby's name coming. She led the line, which was pretty cool. Yeah, that's the family. That's us. There she is. That's her mom. And there she is. All right. So you can see the legacy full circle here from the 2025 or 2020 video I did about leaving a legacy. So Deuteronomy 6, 5, and 7 says, you must love him with all your heart, soul, might, and you must think constantly about these commandments I'm giving you today. You must teach them to your children and talk to them when you are at home or out for a walk, at bedtime, and the first thing in the morning. So here's the penetrating question again. What are you leaving as a legacy? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Given that I have the potential to impact the world thanks to standing on the shoulders of the giant that is Auntie Betty McClaney. And that was a quote from the essay that Shelby did, Slow Down, Shelby. Given that I have the potential to impact the world thanks to standing on the shoulders of the giant that is Auntie Betty. And that was from Shelby. So again, what legacy are you leaving today? And even though me and Janine have children, we are leaving a legacy to kids, to counterparts, to church members, to friends, family. What's the legacy? And hopefully, part of my legacy is through these stewardship videos that you view each week. Here's some resources. Dave Ramsey talks about it in the book, The Legacy Journey. Then there's a book that's a classic called The Treasure Principle, which is Randy Alcorn, and he talks about our lives in between the dots. The first dot is when we're born. The last dot is when we die. What are we doing in that line? The line between our birth and our death. And then finally, there's setting your house in order, which is part of the Crown Financial. And this is talking about actually the logistics of actually setting your house in order, wills, trust, specific special instructions. So here's some resources. So as we change gears, as we always do, let's take a look at the market. We're starting to wind down a little bit, but there's one very interesting company that's reporting. I have a position in NVIDIA, kind of a major position. Once again, here it is. No advice should be seen as recommendations. So just because I own NVIDIA doesn't mean I'm recommending it to you to own. But I'm going to be watching to see how they report out. But we also have Okta. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's a software. We got AutoZone reporting, Macy's, Salesforce, Dick's Sporting Goods, Foot Locker, Best Buy, Costco. So Kohl's, that's right down the street. So be interested because Kohl's has ran into some problems when it comes from their financial picture. So what'll be interesting is not only what they report as earnings, but what's their forward-looking guidance. And the market got shook up last week because some companies just suspended their forward-looking guidance. In fact, which means they didn't even give any. Then along with that, we had the president uh, specifically talk about Apple getting 45% tariff. So, this is definitely a tweeting market, meaning that when he tweets out, it affects the market, especially when it comes to tariffs. But speaking of which, there's some legislation that well, it was an executive order that probably didn't even get a lot of news play, but this is, can be a potential trading opportunity. Once again, do your own research. Trump signs orders to overhaul Nuclear Regulatory Commission to speed up reactor deployment. Right. So we've been talking about the AI play in energy because there's not enough energy um, to fulfill all the needs of the AI, these huge data centers that they need. One of the ways that people are looking at is natural gas. The other is nuclear reactors, these small reactors. So what if this, and you can see there's a reaction from the market. This is URA, which is a uranium exchange traded fund. Look at it take off, signing of that legislation. Look at that volume there. And you can look in URA and using stockanalysis.com and look at the top 10 holdings. Uh, this one has come up a couple of times. OKLO, Okla Incorporated. NXC is a Canadian company that's come up a couple of times I've seen mentioned as a recommendation, NCCJ. So you may want to look at these individually or just play URA, which is still right now kind of reasonable. I have this as a holding. Once again, go back to that in red disclaimer, not a recommendation. Just because I have it in my portfolio doesn't mean you should. But it's only $31.83. But look at it take off. So it's been a nice winner for me in the last couple of months. Here's the overall market, QQQ, and you can see what turned that over. Because remember, QQQ technology based, a lot of technology companies, a lot of smaller companies in QQQ flipped over because of Apple, right? Made a comment about 45% tariff on Apple because the president wants Apple iPhones to be manufactured in the US. All right, so that flipped over that QQQ. And then almost mirroring it was SPY. It flipped over too. A lot of that was tariff talks that let you know we're in a tweet-driven market, and then combine that with people suspending forward-looking earnings. So with that, that is this week's stewardship video. This is the last full weekend of May. We're going into June. So I think if the Lord says the same, I'm looking at maybe we're halfway through the year, looking at maybe a goal setting stewardship video next week, but we'll see. The Lord needs to he needs to lead me on that. But one thing we want to close out with again, Memorial Day weekend, all gave some gave all. Remember them this Memorial Day. And that fits right into that legacy. So ask that question yourself. What type of legacy are you leaving? What type of legacy are you leaving? As always, we've been closing out on Pastor Denny Dwight Davis's 34th pastoral anniversary with the St. John Baptist Church. He'll be doing like his last formal weekend this weekend with Matthew Watley coming in from the DC area to preach. And want to say, if you haven't already, thank our pastor, show it in a tangible way. Those of you who are members. And as he always says, keep a good spirit, have a yabba dabba do good time. And as we say on the stewardship video, remember, Jesus is Lord, therefore he's the owner, but we play that very vital role of following his concepts and following his principles to being the faithful stewards. We'll see you next week.